I think something that's been the case with me, I would say from the start, from my childhood, has been the fact that I've always felt like there were no wrong questions. Maybe you wouldn't find an answer, which is also okay, but sometimes there's just value in asking the question, because even if someone says that they don't have the answer, and which means essentially that they also have the same question, that really helps you feel less isolated in that experience.
They realized that the high surges, which is like 40 points higher than even love and gratitude, were happening when the person was being very authentic. When they were just being, passionate about something, even if it's nothing amazing or great, but really coming from this conviction, talking about something really, strongly, boldly. And that was creating those surges of what is now called like the highest frequency, which is authenticity. So there's so much power in authenticity, because that made me think like the more that we can be fully ourselves in as many environments as possible, the more we are impacting that environment. But also imagine what's happening in our bodies, like how much our health would improve, let's say.
Personally, I learned that just because I didn't want to think about it or experience it again didn't mean that I wasn't already. So that was a big one. There were times that I could consciously tell, sitting at a traffic light, and randomly something would come up in my mind, which I'm like, hey, I was having a great day, excuse me, right? And in other times, I didn't realize, but it was still dictating a lot of the decisions that I was making. So even if I was doing an excellent job of not remembering or recalling a particular time in my life, the fears and the beliefs that it had left within me. And now, after this many years of having done therapy, I understand that my cells could almost feel that memory.
Joining us for today's episode is Yusra Muhammad, who ranks very high amongst two of my lists, my favorite human and my favorite clients. She's originally from Pakistan, born and raised in the UAE. She designs learning experiences for communities, workplaces, and students. Yusra originally qualified as a journalist and a creative writer. She enjoys photography and witnessing the transformative power of authenticity and unlearning as a way to access greater levels of abundance and impact. This has led to a lifelong journey full of curiosity, exploration, and connection. Yusra has also been a big part of the Love Academy initiative, which we talked about in episode 11. She has very generously shared her skills and her heart to create the website, and I'm so incredibly grateful for her. Welcome to the Epiphany Dialogues, Yusra.
Thank you so much, Zimmy. I am so honored to be here, and thank you for that introduction. You also top all of my lists.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's just going to be me and you, mutual admiration society going on here a little bit, because Nick, due to unforeseeable circumstances, couldn't make it today. But yeah, let's make the most of it and make it an episode that we both enjoy doing as well and publishing. So
I
it's
look forward
really
to
good
it.
to see you here.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, I've been listening to all the other episodes that have preceded mine, and I'm just so excited to be on here, to be included in the list. It's an honor.
Oh, yeah, no, it was definitely on the list right from the beginning. It's just taken us a little bit of time. Getting right into it. During the course of this episode, we will be discussing your experience of therapy, the insights, the learnings, the epiphanies that therapy brought to you. To start us off, would you like to tell us about the first time that you felt authenticity or being yourself was an act of healing?
It was really interesting. I think the first time that comes to mind is back in high school. And it wasn't really me, but someone else who accidentally modeled it for me. This was at a time where our family had unfortunately experienced the loss of a lot of close friends in a very short amount of time, like in a handful of years. And so this particular day, someone very close to us had passed away. And we were all as a family just discussing how that leaves this feeling of helplessness. Me as a teenager at the time, I had learned to withdraw and not reach out to anyone who'd lost a family member because I felt like there was no way I could help. So I just felt like, there wasn't any use or wasn't any good that I was bringing.
Right.
But this particular night, as we were saying good night to each other, one of our siblings just went ahead and they said, "You know what? Can we agree to leave the hall light on? Because I'm a little scared." And we're like, "Huh? What? Why?" And they go like, "You know what? Because I mean, I really miss the person who passed away, but I also worry that they might show up, like they might visit us."
Right.
And it served almost like a comic relief in that moment. But also, we all just stood there just talking about how that is a very strange experience, where you miss someone, but you're also a little scared. And all of this, the other realm and those discussions kind of do sound a little spooky. And while we were laughing, it occurred to me that him just sharing his experience, while it didn't make a lot of logical sense why, but it kind of transformed that heaviness. It just kind of made us all feel like we were in this shared experience. And maybe there wasn't much value that information was adding, but it was feeling different. It was feeling more whole again, lighter. And so that's when I started these experiments of, okay, if I just show up and if I just say what I'm feeling or experiencing, does that create any change?
Wow. Wow, that is so interesting. Yes, I mean, I'm in that instant, I guess you were quite young, but it left an impact on you that it really did disarm the discomfort or the awkwardness and, so many different emotions that were there. There was grief, but there was also this strange feeling that a lot of the younger ones may not have experienced, that kind of loss before. So that was, yeah, that's really good on you for noticing that and picking that up in that moment and experimenting with it, which is something I love to do, just to see, how people work and how can I use something, as a guidepost for myself to, help improve who I am. And it's really interesting that you talk about authenticity because there's a study that has been released. It's newish, which is so just to take you through it. It's called the Spain Scale Study. It's a SPANE, Spain. It's named after the person, I think, who developed it. So what they did was that they obviously, because it's new, we already know that certain emotions are on the higher frequency vibration, how they make you feel and how those frequencies emit from us. And then there are certain emotions that are on the lower scale. So that was known. So they took a few of the higher ones and a few of the lower ones, and they gathered at least, I think there was 1,000 people in that sample. And they gathered these people in a cage, which is called a Faraday cage, which is basically, it stops all other electromagnetic waves and frequencies from, diluting or mixing up with that person's energetic field. And they just basically made them talk about different things that elicit different emotions to measure those frequencies that they were emitting. So most of it just went as expected. It was really, how science just does things over and over just to make sure that this is correct. So that was what they were expecting. But what happened was that while there were those expected surges going up when they talk about love, gratitude, appreciation, things like that, and then the lower surges that were happening with, like, say, guilt, shame, anger, hatred, disgust, things like that. So that was happening, but they also noticed a really much higher surge happening at certain points, which they couldn't identify in the beginning. Like, why does this happen? Like, this person is talking about neither necessarily love, appreciation and things, or even guilt or shame. What's going on? And so they repeated it over and over to understand what was going on. And they realized that the high surges, which is like 40 points higher than even love and gratitude, were happening when the person was being very authentic, when they were just being passionate about something, even if it's nothing amazing or great, but really coming from this conviction, talking about something really strongly, boldly. And that was creating those surges of what is now called like the highest frequency, which is authenticity. So there's so much power in authenticity, because that made me think like the more that we can be fully ourselves in as many environments as possible, the more we are impacting that environment. But also imagine what's happening in our bodies, like how much our health would improve, let's say, if we were kind of, mostly emitting and feeling, processing that kind of energy. So yeah, thanks for starting us off on that.
Thank you. And that's so interesting what you just mentioned, because for me, what I notice with kids is that they're really in their very authentic expression. There is very little, assessment of the appropriateness. The younger the child is, the better. I love that about them. And personally, I'm someone who's really interested in learning. So I noticed that children are essentially the best learners, or they model the best ways to learn, because essentially for them, the entire experiment that they're running throughout their day is about how different things feel to them. And that is enough feedback to either continue on that or to change course. So, that says something about the power of authenticity, I feel, because they are in the highest level of learning in terms of the rate at which they're learning. And they take on those insights for the rest of their life.
Yeah, and I mean, kids are like honestly my role models. I mean, the way that they exhibit curiosity, okay, and authenticity, but also being very present. They're literally in the moment. They can be screaming and shouting and like, having like a crisis in a moment. And then the next moment they've, released it. They felt it, fully owned it. And then they're laughing and playing, and that's really the healthy way. This is what we are taught not to do, or it's suppressed or controlled. But the idea is, of course, like not having temper tantrums everywhere as adults, but to be able to feel everything, be present, be curious, and keep coming back to who you are. What do I respond to, or what do I respond with to what has just happened and what I have just felt? And how do I stay curious about who I can be next, Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so you wanted to also talk about, if I'm not mistaken, the healing power of learning. I feel like this flows well into that, if that's okay.
It does. I'd like to say that I think of learning as very different to the academic sense, which is more to do with, knowledge acquisition and demonstrating the awareness and knowledge that you've gained. But what I mean by learning here is just change in behavior based on, experience. So real life application, based on any meanings that an individual has kind of gained, right? So what I feel is that since a lot of the times healing is referred to more in terms of healing from trauma or a difficult experience as such, sometimes the bit about it just becoming whole, becoming more greater. And recently when I was hearing one of the earlier episodes of this podcast, you mentioned expansive, and I think for me, as someone who's not from the psychology field, that's a very good reference of feeling expansive, feeling more whole. Just I feel like learning has a significant way of helping us gain a sense of that in our day to day. I notice that any experiments that one runs, any new experiences where we go and we try to make a sense of who we are, generally just leave us feeling more whole. And so there's this transformative power just from having experienced something new, where we learn something about ourselves. That's really insightful for me. I tend to be very rational. I tend to, overthink about why I must experience something a number of times before I actually have the chance even to experience it. So sometimes just knowing that the why will maybe be after the experience, it'll make sense to me, really helps just step into a new experience. And that kind of learning why through the experience really heals me in ways that I could not have predicted beforehand.
Yeah. So would you recommend doing things and experiencing things and expansively putting yourself out there a little bit in life?
I would recommend it. The way I see it, it's crucial. It's element, you know, when it comes to life in general. I think we're learning every day, even if we're not choosing to actively, gain knowledge. We're still learning in our day something about ourselves or our environment, and so that's not really voluntary. It's just about how much of that we would like to choose and then intend to learn, right? And that kind of, I mean, the more we allow the right experiences by simply going, I'm curious about this. This is something that's really been a major insight for me from therapy. It's
Yeah.
just that allowing and saying that I'm ready to experience somehow just brings in your orbit these new experiences which don't really make quote unquote logical sense of how you landed with that opportunity or, unlocked something that you didn't know you were capable of, purely from just setting the intention and saying, I would like to learn more about myself in this realm. So I would definitely recommend it.
Right. The reason why you're one of my favorite clients is your uh, enchantment, I would say, with curiosity. I love that because that really expands like how you see yourself. How do you connect with yourself? What do you say to the parts of yourself that come up, that need your attention, and how you approach them with so much curiosity and love? It's really so heartening for me to see you being able to do that through these years and how far you've come in embracing yourself and being so much more authentic, living a fuller life, taking certain kind of decisions and, chances and doing so well at them.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. And I have to say, of course, I mean, the right guides, the right teachers along the way when it comes to learning are just as important. I think something that's been the case with me, I would say from the start, from my childhood, has been the fact that I've always felt like there were no wrong questions. Maybe you wouldn't find an answer, which is also okay. But sometimes there's just value in asking the question because even if someone says that they don't have the answer, and which means essentially that they also have the same question, that
True.
really helps you feel less, you know, less isolated in that experience. So even the fact that, I mean, I've tried out things I would say where I haven't had the same results that as I was expecting, I rarely feel disappointed because I feel like perhaps the need or that calling was for me to learn why I didn't want to continue on that path. And sometimes learning what not to do is as important as what to do.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Would you be willing to talk about unlearning, therapy as a tool to unlearn certain things? Because learning, yes, is very important, but also I feel like from our, let's say, cultural background and the way that we've been brought up and things like that, like things have just been taught and that's just how we're supposed to do it and not question it. And then a lot of times in therapy, we are unlearning a lot of things.
So when it comes to unlearning, I feel like that is still, I understand that, of course, the word learning is in there for a reason. It's because there's still, a new perspective that we're gaining. But often in the case of therapy, what I've experienced is that it's reframing or relearning what we associated originally with an experience, with a circumstance, with ourselves. I have to say, in my personal experience, that a lot of this unlearning has to do with what I have labeled myself as based on circumstances or experiences. And so affording myself that grace of seeing it from a better perspective, a perspective that is not only more productive, again, because I'm very rational, I think everything is about does it help? Is there a benefit to it?
Sure.
But generally the benefit of having a healthier outlook by allowing myself to reassess who I have been so far and create a healthier narrative for myself, a healthier story. So it could be that the facts remain the same, but the way I view myself or view others in that situation is with a lot more grace. And I have to say, Zimmy, that sometimes it's so difficult to experience something that you genuinely have convinced yourself you would rather not think about. So having someone else there someone who's quite literally holding time and space for you to experience that feeling or that emotion one more time that you've kind of like bottled up or suppressed or filed away in the back of your mind as never doing that again.
Yeah.
Just having someone there holding that space and time because they believe, they have hope that you going back to it and affording yourself more grace and just being more loving towards that entire experience. Having that faith encourages you to keep going. And like, it's a very difficult experience, of course, sometimes where you don't want to revisit, prior experiences. But the fact that someone's dedicated their life's work to that because they know the power of reframing and kind of seeing, unlearning the not so great narrative that we've assigned for ourselves. That kind of gives you the courage to continue along. And
Yeah.
I think in my earlier days with you, I think I really resisted that often, and I would go into why that's not needed or that's already been addressed. No, thank you. And as I learned later on throughout my, you know, the number of years that I've known you, alhamdulillah, that there's always benefit in allowing ourselves to have a healthier experiences of the same feelings that we've kind of kept aside, that we've considered unnecessary or too overwhelming. There's more to it, and the more we allow ourselves to experience it from a more expansive state, it helps us to have a more lighter experience. It's very surprising. I feel like, as someone who hasn't come from a psychology background, it's almost astonishing how much of an effect it has. And you go like, hold on. And myself being from a journalism background, you know the facts, you know the who, what, why. So you're like, why does this feel different all of a sudden? That's been consistently an insight that I've gained, and I thank everyone who takes on this field because honestly, it creates a lot of courage for those of us who wouldn't have it otherwise.
Yeah, no, very well said, and very important as well to talk about this. If there are any people kind of on the fence about therapy, would you like to share a little bit about how this helps? How has this, let's say, benefited you, what you just talked about, and just therapy in general?
I think I can speak from my own experience of what I originally thought therapy was, which was heavily, heavily influenced by pop culture, right? And so I thought it was just revisiting a lot of stuff that needn't be addressed and, just sharing, the darkest secrets and just like kind of what made me really hesitant was that it almost sounded like something where you would hand over the controls to someone
Sure.
else of your mind. And because I am a very rational person, I really value my mind and I would like to very much control it myself. Thank you. So,
Absolutely.
it almost felt too vulnerable, it didn't feel safe at all. And then, as with many experiences in life, sometimes I tell myself that, okay, if our theory is what it is and we want to just gain more proof of why something is not worth experiencing, let's go ahead and experience enough of it to know that this is why, we were right in the first place. We shouldn't
Yeah,
have done it at all. And
right.
I don't know if I've told you this, Zimmy, but in the past I had tried taking sessions with other therapists, like one or twice. And I just felt that, very quickly I was able to tell if it was something I wanted to continue. And what I realized was that we come into it a lot of the times thinking that, again, it's handing over of control because the entire narrative is around we need to control these aspects. Anyone who's even considering therapy at all, it's probably because they're experiencing the loss or lack of control to the level that they would like in a particular area of life.
Right.
So when you're going like, hold on, this like I have to try to think of it like an airplane dashboard. Like I know what this button does. I know why when I press this thing gets filed to the back and I can continue on with my day. Why is it spilling over into my day?
Yes.
I remember I used to call it's getting in the way of my day, or, life
Mm-hmm.
is forcing me to face this. Why? I don't need to. I'm good.
Right.
And so what I learned was that both our physical body, but also our mind are always on our side. And so essentially, it's them not getting in the way as much as it's them raising the flag for this is who we find valuable, which is ourselves. Please take a moment to address this. And so, as with any system, any tool that we have in life, where if we don't know why it's not functioning the way we would like it to function, you have to go find an expert to help you understand that. So that's definitely a very good reason to try therapy. But then also, I think sometimes it helps to see someone who's been on a path and can again hold space for you to give you the almost the goodwill or the encouragement to continue on the path that you are, because some of the things that I learned in therapy that I didn't know why I was doing, but those were actually good practices. Those were actually good things that I was, those were healthy patterns. I just didn't know why I was doing them or if it was even worth doing them.
Right.
So, it helped me to continue and make it a more stronger practice.
Is there an example for that, perhaps?
I think one of the bigger examples that stands out is I would often visualize, especially for professional settings, before going into a meeting, I would essentially visualize the outcome. And then it would almost become a matter of just going in and filling the part, just doing my end of the conversation. And I would literally live the same outcome that I had visualized. I noticed that whenever I wasn't doing that, or if I was feeling too flustered or pressed for time, and I didn't take a moment to just kind of realize the outcome of why I was putting in all of this effort was for that particular visual, I would mess up, right? It wouldn't feel the same way. It would feel just awkward and unclear. And all it was taking was just 5 minutes before I stepped in to just go like, I understand. At the end of this session, I can almost hear this person say, A, B, and C. And quite literally, sometimes it would freak me out that, they would say the very sentences. So that was new. I didn't have an explanation for it. And I also didn't have a reference of if it was a good thing. So, Alhamdulillah, was glad to hear and understand why that was happening and how I could replicate the same results in other areas of my life where perhaps I couldn't visualize because of different reasons, different beliefs I had. But then there were other tools I could use that you helped me learn how to use. And then that essentially created the same results. So, again, a major aspect of therapy, I think, is it allows us or frees us to start experiencing the opportunities that we've already kind of intuitively know are capable of experiencing. I think all of us have that. Some people, I think, refer to it as potential. Maybe in my case, a lot of times folks would tell me I'm daydreaming. And then fortunately, as I learned, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we label it, because if it's real enough to bring us a beautiful experience, a great life experience, then that's all that matters.
Absolutely true. Thank you. So in terms of just going back to when you were talking about like the emotions that you don't necessarily want to feel, or you feel like, okay, I've done that, or I don't want to go back there. There, of course, we all have, heavy memories, experiences, emotions that, of course, would be beneficial to heal them or comfort those versions of us who have felt them. Of course, I get that. But of course, a lot of people, like you said, don't necessarily want to go back there again because they feel like, what's the point? I felt it once. It wasn't good. Why do I need to feel it again? What would you say to that? Like, what makes it worth it?
I think personally, I learned that just because I didn't want to think about it or experience it again didn't mean that I wasn't already. So that was a big one. There were times that I could consciously tell sitting at a traffic light and randomly something would come up in my mind, which I'm like, hey, I was having a great day, excuse me. And in other times, I didn't realize, but it was still dictating a lot of the decisions that I was making. So even if I was doing an excellent job of not remembering or recalling a particular time in my life, the fears and the beliefs that it had left within me and Now, after this many years of having done therapy, I understand that I could physically, like my cells could almost feel that memory, even if I wasn't consciously aware mentally that I was experiencing it. But that's the level to which that had left an imprint. So I don't think it's fully a choice. And so it was still dictating a lot. And I don't think I would have made a lot of the decisions that I have in life if I continue to let it dictate, let those experiences decide for me what I would like to decide for myself. So that's definitely a huge reason. And then on top of that, now I also feel that there is no experience that is, pure accident happening, right? There is always more to it. So just having some faith that if we were meant to experience something and we were to experience the feelings and the thoughts and meanings that came with it, then perhaps just kind of putting it in the trash bin of our mind is not the only outcome that was desired from it.
Right. Hi, everyone. We just wanted to take a quick moment to thank you for being here with us at the Epiphany Dialogues, where curiosity meets consciousness. If you're enjoying this episode, please hit the like button, follow, subscribe, and share with like-minded people.
And you're also welcome to join our conversation. If you have an epiphany to share, please leave us a comment or email us. Details are in the description below. And with that, back to the episode.
And so I guess what I've seen is what happens is that even if you're functioning quite okay and these things are kind of bubbling in the background and you're able to kind of, go ahead with your life with that happening, I've noticed that the amount of energy that it takes to kind of keep them below the surface, that we're constantly like, there's a conflict within us. There's this, this energy that is there that is going into that, which once we heal that, it frees that energy up and we start creating more. Like it's channeled into other things that we actually want to do. Like, rather than using your energy to avoid something, you use that energy to actually create the life or the experience of life that you want. So that for me was, I'm like you, I have to kind of in my mind work things out as well. Like, what's the benefit? What do I get out of this? How does this help me? So I've done that forever. And I think that's why we relate to each other a lot as well. Level, because I've always been like, oh my God. So yeah, see, as soon as I started healing things, that's when, gradually, slowly, and now like almost in full force, just creating things that I want. Like, even if it's just for fun, but I have that energy to put into things that bring me joy rather than putting it into things that are making me avoid sadness or, heaviness of some kind. And I want to just put this here right now because a lot of people, of course, and I'm really happy if that's the case, when they say that I haven't had any traumas, like, so I don't need therapy. So what, again, something that I have learned is that sometimes the most astounding part of healing and therapy is realizing that it wasn't the big things that created like the wounds and pain. It doesn't have to be, a big traumatic event. It can just be the absence of what we needed that creates pain as well. This years of not being asked how you feel, what you prefer, what lights you up, not because our parents were trying to mess us up. It's because they were busy. They had their own stresses. This is how they were taught. Like, if I can just provide everything, then that should be enough. It can be forcing yourself to be a certain way in order to be loved or accepted or praised. It can be silencing yourself to keep peace. Now, these are all emotions as well that keep coming up. Like then in the workplace, like I keep holding back. I keep not trying to, cause any confrontations. I keep trying to keep the peace. It can be not asking for anything and just accepting what you're given, which is like, settling for things like, no, this is okay. It's not hurting me. So even if it's not like, being expansive, it's not hurting me. So, I just want to say here that sometimes we do believe that there are no traumas, and that's great, but just take a moment and see, like, if there's anything that is coming up in your daily life or, very regularly where you feel like I'm not able to be my full self, or I'm holding back, or I'm not expansive enough. Again, I know I love using that word because it just, completely embodies everything that we all want to feel, So I just say it's worthwhile looking into what you could, therapy is where we learn to name those invisible needs and to grieve them first, not having them. And then we learned to start giving them to ourselves. So that is another part of therapy that I find very, very empowering for people. It doesn't have to be anything big, but just to name it that, yeah, I was never really asked, what do I prefer? I was always just told what to do. So I thought all relationships are like that. So I do that now with my husband or with my wife. It can be anything of that sort. I do that at work. I don't really come with curiosity. I don't really express what I want. And then what that does then is once we start giving it to ourselves, then we start feeling worthy of having them and having them met by others as well. And so we stand up a little more and show up a little more. And I feel that that's beautiful because once we start doing that, that's when we start fulfilling our purpose in this life, right?
I agree because I feel like our purpose is, in fact, at least personally, this is my belief, is to discover more of ourselves in this life experience.
Yes.
I honestly feel it's to discover ourselves and our creator and, the gift of life, why it is a gift, in fact. So I genuinely feel like, so for example, when you mentioned the bit about the resources that are being used to kind of hold down a lot or just, follow protocol.
Yes.
I think that a lot of that has to do with I didn't have words for it until you just described it, right? But I just kept saying it's a lighter experience. Somehow it feels lighter. And now it makes sense that once those resources are no longer engaged in
Yes.
holding down things a very particular way that we've thought is necessary. An example that comes to mind for me, and this is nothing traumatic at all, because I mean, if you ask my high school mates, they would have some very choice words for the example I'm about to give. But like being an A-star student, it's not traumatic at all. In fact, coming from a South Asian background, it's a matter of privilege. It's, this is what you're supposed to be. So that's excellent. You're a star child. And yet it was something that I didn't know I was not particularly keen on. It was great that it happened early on in life, that I was good at studies. But had I realized earlier, maybe I would have been more of on a cruise control level. Like it was okay to not ace everything that but all of these resources that I had put into acing, and I didn't even know why. Why was I trying for 100%? And something that comes to mind is like we were told not to make silly mistakes. Why not? I mean, there's so much fun. And so once I started discovering that about myself, that I particularly didn't need to ace everything all the time, it took off a lot of that pressure. It felt lighter.
Yeah.
Not to say that, alhamdulillah, I was still able to do pretty well, but now it was more about what I wanted to experience. So if an outcome of that was also good performance, that's great. But even if it was not, if it was a fun ride, what I learned about myself is that I value that a lot more.
Yeah.
And so I could live in the moment much more freely and fully if I wasn't so highly engaged in getting that, grade right at the end.
I'm so glad you're expressing that because there are completely people are boxed into very small boxes of expectations. Like not everyone is going to be an A-star student, and that doesn't mean that they're not good enough. They just have other skills, other gifts that you suppress so much, by putting them in that box that it takes so long for us to then get out and then get the energy and get, all the resources that we need in order to finally express those gifts, right? I'm so glad that you as a young person is saying that because, I mean, every time I have young people, like young meaning 20, in their 20s, let's say. For me, they're very young people. Whatever.
Likewise.
Whatever. I mean, you started when you were in your 20s, right? And so that's what I'm talking about. Like when a young person like you comes for therapy willingly, with an open mind, curious, it makes me so happy because you're going to make so much more of your life by virtue of having a little more time to be able to, fully embrace who you are and then start expressing it and then being appreciated for it. And it doesn't have to be in those sectors that were at least, the revered ones, where you're able to, bring your own whimsy. Like I feel like we don't talk about whimsy enough. Like I believe it's very, very important, and it separates us from everyone and helps us to really stand out, not necessarily in a strong way where you want to be, want to go viral or anything in that way, but really just the idea of bringing that sense of, let's say, silliness. I call it whimsy, because it's just an element of you that kind of defies the expected professional, practical part of you. What I have not been able to stop myself from doing, even as a therapist, is I haven't been able to keep my whimsy out of my sessions, even though there are people who come expecting a very serious, very wise person who has these views that they will impose on you and that will help you. No, but I'm more like, hey, like a joke here, a smile there, a little bit of sarcasm, or whatever it might be. And also just expressing things about myself. I've never held back and just been that one-way street kind of therapist where you just talk about things and, I don't have so much reaction, or I don't share that I relate to that. And this is, what happened for me, and this is what I did, and this is one way that you could possibly look at this or work through this. And I find that it's very helpful, and I find like the people who are meant to work with you and benefit through that work actually like that, even in a therapist. Like, so I'm just giving my example because that's what I know best, but you're in a professional environment as well, like a corporate place, and it may not be welcomed to be a
It's
little
really
silly or
interesting.
playful.
Maybe officially not, I have to say. I have to agree. In a professional setting, I do feel like, especially in corporate, I mean, of course, officially, it's been said a lot, and there are all these memes about how, no one's naming the elephant in the room. But it is often, I have seen, the most impactful leadership, because again, leaders, from what I understand and the kind of leadership I try to emulate, is a leader is someone who's leading by state. They're taking the first step. They're demonstrating or setting an example, basically. And so if you can set an example from a place of honesty, authenticity, which means you come in with all of your whimsical, approaches, we call it innovation in corporate, right? So all of that creativity that you need to problem solve, basically, you wouldn't be able to breathe life into it if you don't allow the whimsy to come forth. And of course, there are professional ways of doing that, but that's not to say that that work does not have space for whimsy, for emotions, for a very human, honest experience. And something I've loved about our sessions is that you do share a joke here and there, and you share your own experience. And so I appreciate that almost sometimes the spotlight is taken away from me. I've been enough of a troublemaker. So, it just feels more included. What I've noticed, Zimmy, I don't know if this is true of your experience with the many clients that you've had, mashallah, but I've noticed that as I speak on behalf of us, whimsical folks, the quote unquote troublemakers, and those who may have the odd question when someone, especially from a place of authority, is sharing the protocol or how things should be. There's always this voice in the back of the room going like, but what if we do this completely other way, which why not? I've often been that voice myself. And I noticed that it's just a lot of learning to quiet that down and hold that back, which is why perhaps folks like with this nature, these tendencies tend to benefit a lot from therapy, because suddenly you realize, hold on, there is space for me, and there is space for that inner voice, that very whimsical approach to life. Those who do things in the spirit of rules, but not down to the rule book fully. I noticed that a lot of my friends with a similar tendency have really benefited then from therapy because for the first time it feels very okay to be that way.
Yeah, it is. It is welcome. Like, even as a therapist, from my point of view, I welcome that a lot more than people who will just kind of say yes, okay, and agree. And then it doesn't go very deep because they were just being respectful or, nice. And they thought that's how therapy works. Someone just tells you something and then you just take it, and it's supposed to work. But really, no, the idea is to have a discourse. The idea is for me to say, have you considered this? And you say, nope, I have considered it, and nope, and I will say, okay, tell me more. And then we understand, okay, why is that no there? And where do we go from here? Because there's 100 different potential solutions and ways to work with something for your benefit. So it is always helpful for me to do that because I know then that we're doing some actual work, some deeper work that you have allowed yourself to process, that you have given yourself permission to actually step up and say, no, sorry, I don't agree with that, or I don't see how that works, or explain this to me in another way. I love when people do that, and I'm more invested and involved because I can see they are more invested and involved. And I love being challenged or questioned or make up other scenarios. I mean, I've been doing that all my life, like all sorts of scenarios. I started with the worst case scenarios, which was my life. It was my second profession, really, I used to say. And then I moved to creating the best case scenarios and then got somewhere in the middle where I live now, where it's neither that, it's not that, but just how do I make this moment the best, where I'm still using my imagination in all of these, all across the spectrum, but it's just how I'm using it. So I'm very good with, like, you throw something at me and say, no, I've done that and it doesn't work, or how about I do this, and and I will get on that train with you. And I was like, yes, I want to know how your mind works. I am fascinated by human, psychology and intellect and emotions. And I love for people to feel safe enough to show me how their inner, network works. So yeah, you have been amazing at that. And thank you. Thank you for helping me to learn so much through our sessions as well.
Thank you so much as well. I just want to add this one piece here because, again, when you mention safety, it has a lot to do, Zimmy. In my particular case, of course, it was you who created that safety. But I noticed that a lot of the times the message around learning, particularly, is that a good learner is someone who can demonstrate the learning and who can kind of, again, going back to grades and all of those things, like the very academic sense. But what I've noticed, both for myself and people who are completely different in the way that they like to learn, right? There's so many different learning styles and so many ways we can learn, right? I think essentially it's about being open. Anyone who is really open to disagree, open to say, I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense to me, right?
Yes.
That's fine because that is to me what I would say a good learner because they're being honest with what makes sense. And so I noticed that sometimes, the traditional education approach takes away from that because if things don't make sense to you, you're the problem.
Yes.
And I really want to, use this opportunity to say that to anyone listening that if they don't make sense, that's the perfect place to be. Because if they really do make sense, they will make sense to you too, But if they don't, that is exactly where you need to be to learn more about why. I wouldn't believe anyone if they were telling me that something that doesn't make sense to me at present, the only hurdle there is me.
Absolutely.
Because I'm just another person and I made it to this point, so hopefully I do have the tools. And what I love about my experience of the sessions with you is that when I am that honest and when I do tell you that something doesn't make sense or I don't want to do it, you're just as open and you're like, great, then explore what this means and what we can do, what we can take this to mean. So,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to add that there.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I've done that with myself for a long time as well, not just 16 years with clients, but really half my adult life. And so it makes me happy when you say that I've just to show me as a mirror that I am holding that space and I'm still doing that work, because I was like that as well. Like I used to just argue within myself, like, no, what are you talking about? Like, what's wrong with you, woman? You know?
A
And
hundred
then I
percent.
would reply to myself, and I had to figure out so many different ways to reach myself in a manner that was actually substantial and meaningful. I wanted to ask you about what is an epiphany that stands out from your experience of therapy?
I think the very first one that that has stuck with me and that I've kind of used as a North Star for my life experience since has been around my health and it being almost a guidance from my body, a message, because I realized that the aha moment was to realize that my body was always on my side, right? It was always looking out for me. It is always looking out for me, even when I am not, even if I'm convinced that other factors or circumstances are of greater priority. It kind of very gently disagrees. And so if I'm willing to have that conversation with it in a gentle tone, then that's all that's needed. But it's never standing in my way. I think the major shift or the epiphany that I experienced was I used to think of health as something that got in my way a lot, especially in my 20s. I went through a number of,
Yeah.
physical conditions and experiences, diagnoses, which made me feel again, when we're younger, we see, an end goal and everything in the way is in the way.
Yeah.
But sometimes, and particularly in the case of our physical health, I feel it's only wanting us to go for bigger, better things. And so what our body is doing is it's essentially reminding us of ourselves as the top priority. As they say on aircrafts, you put on your mask first before you put it on for others. So that's all it's doing. And since then, I've learned to view it as a very dear friend who I'm very fond of and I'm very grateful for, alhamdulillah, that I have been blessed with this vessel.
Yeah, that is a journey that I have been witness to through the years, and it just still makes me tear up, actually. The way that sometimes you message me and you tell me, well, this said this happened, but I did this and this and this, and I took care of it, and I'm doing fine now. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Like, especially when it comes to, let's say, body or health, which was your biggest kind of worry. How has the relationship now become with your body? How do you feel in your body? How do you talk to your body?
I feel very grateful for it. That's the word that comes up immediately. I feel very blessed, right? And what's unique is that it's not very conditional. It's not at all conditional, in fact. It's not like I feel grateful only on the days that I feel great and I've done an excellent workout, and even on the days that I'm quite exhausted, or I can tell that, perhaps in terms of you know my physical energy, this I'm coming down with something, or I'm not feeling my best, I'm still able to love my body. I see like a very dear friend, as I said, like someone who I'm very fond of. I see where it's coming from, and I love the fact that it's watching out for me. And so it's a relationship where I can really rely, and I hope, and I often speak to myself actually, where I say that I hope for my body that I am someone that it can rely on. I would like for that trust to always
Yes.
be there. In recent years, I've been, alhamdulillah, fortunate enough that I have been able to build that trust more. And I hope that for how much ever of, inshallah, my life I have, that this continues, because I see it it impact areas of my life that I didn't know were connected.
Yes.
I'm not someone who identified very much with being intuitive. And of late, this connection has really helped with completely rational, logical aspects of life.
Yes.
Technology, sorry, with
Yeah.
completely rational tech related aspects, which I'm like, hold on, how can my body help me fix a tech issue? Where I'm like, if I just click here, and it just feels more, like just give it one more try, and actually it works. So I'm very amazed in terms of how that trust manifests in other things. But even if it's just myself, completely sitting by myself, at the beach, just being, I just truly enjoy the experience of, the concoction of elements that is my physical being. I feel very grateful for it. And thank you, Zimmy, for all of your effort, in terms of helping me connect with that gratitude within myself.
Of course, my pleasure. And that's where our intuition is, like you said, but also our creativity. So now you are getting a taste of the wholeness of Yusra, apart from just the intellectual or the practical, which is, I think it's a beautiful experience to have in life. And I'm so happy to see you having that. Before we end our episode, Yusra, usually this is Nick's question. He does it much better than I do, but today it's up to me. So we ask our guests, if you could go back in time and speak to a younger version of yourself who would find something that you say very meaningful at that moment in life, what would you say to her?
I think I would just observe her for a little bit, right? Because I feel like it would matter to her that someone's there just holding space.
Oh, I love that.
And then if I were to say something, I think I would tell her that she's okay. Like, I understand that having all the questions that she does in her mind and feeling like the questions perhaps mean that she is not the most compliant, the most attuned. That's a momentary feeling in the grand scheme of things. And the more she allows herself to express those questions and continue asking them with the faith that she will get the answers whenever she is ready, or life is ready, or the time is right, uh, she will just value having those questions as she sees the answers unfold.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now that you have said it, and I'm sure you have said it in the past as well to your younger self, but now that you've said it in this moment, she has received it and she will hold on to that part of her, the curious, the questioning. And it shows that this, if we believe that is, there's no past, present, or future, that you actually said that to her and she continued and became who you are and who you're becoming, that's all we want, right?
It is. It is. Thank you for being the guide that you are, Zumi. I
It's
have to just
absolutely
add in
my
a very
pleasure.
quick note around great teachers, and the fact that a good sign for anyone who's looking for the right teachers is to see if anything that they share with you, you're able to implement that in their absence. That was a big takeaway for me for why therapy with you felt right. Was because a lot of what I was learning about myself, I could implement it in your absence.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that it was something I could do until the training wheels came off and I was pedaling. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, of course. No, my pleasure. This is why nowadays, whenever we touch base, I tell you, I think you got this, Yusra. Let me know if you need help, but I think you got this, and you usually got this. I mean, I am so happy about that. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and this was so enlightening and so uplifting. And I'm sure a lot of people will get inspired listening to this to delve a little deeper, be a little more curious, and approach yourself with more kindness and compassion. Thank you, Yusra.
Thank you for having me, Zimmy.